Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on barcoding solutions in Hexagon EAM. I hope everyone is having a great summer. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tyler Davis, who will be highlighting the barcoding and scanning solutions in Hexagon EAM. Please note we will have time at the end of this session for Q&A, so feel free to submit those in the chat and stick around until the end. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll hand things off to Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Hey guys, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scan Smarter barcoding webinar here. Quick down and dirty as we go through. We'll be looking at some of the setup and configuration. There's a little bit of a demo video with that. And then after, we'll talk a little bit about some of the scan-based workflows that we can do inside of EAM, some hardware and device info, and then some best practice observations. So what is EAM barcoding? So the barcoding application is an extension of EAM itself. It lets the users interact with data points inside of EAM by essentially turning those values into scannable codes and labels, right? So it eliminates manual data entry by enabling real-time updates and scanning capabilities to allow you to input data directly. So kind of think of it as like a lightweight smart connector between EAM and a label maker almost. So why does barcoding matter? These are pretty straightforward, pretty obvious, right? But they reduce manual entry, so less typing, fewer errors, which drives right into improving your data accuracy. You can't fat finger something that you scan, right? So, and in general, it just speeds up common tasks like scanning parts, issuing parts to work orders, physical inventories, things like that. And then our typical use cases, where do we see this? Warehousing, maintenance, inventory, definitely. So warehousing for parts, receipt, inventory tracking, looking at finding bin locations rather. Maintenance for scanning equipment, their work orders, accessing repair logs through scanning past barcodes, and then inventory, right? So real-time stock management, so you can keep up with counts. How do we put those two together so that we can utilize the EAM barcoding application? So the application, of course, is a standalone app, right? And it has to be configured with EAM. The barcoding functionality itself is native to EAM, so there's not a need for an integration or any third-party middleware or anything like that, right? So EAM's barcoding is activated through the licensing key. So once you have the barcode license, the key is activated, and that unlocks the functionality of EAM or barcoding within EAM, right? And when you have that installed, you also have the ability to utilize the barcoding application as its own barcoding server, so that you can create setups and configurations for advanced workflows or accessing across larger environments, right? Or creating like a centralized label hub, for example. So again, the barcodes can be created directly in the application and EAM with that barcoding server. Again, it's available for almost every type of data point, mainly used against, parts, assets, store bins, tools, employees, things like that. And of course, we can customize all these different labels for all these different data points inside the application through the label designer. For label printing options and your types here coming out, the application will support code 12839 extension and the UPCs, along with some additional fonts that can be added as well. And the last piece of the configuration before we really kind of, jumped ahead there. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. All right. So talking about the license key that's required, right? So that's the 7IBCE key. This controls your barcoding license and access. So without that, you don't really have the core trigger enabled to produce the labeling functionality. There's also some interface permissions that may be required for users and user groups with who are being set up to utilize barcoding. This revolves around things like the ability to manipulate the materials module procurement, things like that. So like receiving and issuing to inventory, cycle counts, asset lookups. The majority of your user groups will have this, but if you are custom tailoring user groups, just keep that in mind. Interface permissions for those types of items will be required for the barcoding functionality to work. And as for user setup, with the barcoding application, it is accessed by your user and the barcoding license tied to the user, right? So that's where the barcoding license comes into play. They have to have, of course, the appropriate organization and store access. The user group that they're in has to have those permissions, of course. And if they are going to be doing any type of scanning from mobile, then they'll have to have the mobile license as well, just to keep that in mind. So a little bit of info on the store configuration. When setting up for the server, internally to EAM, you have to have, of course, the label server path, which is configured through the application as you're setting it up. And then, of course, the printer and a template. The printer, of course, is set up in EAM and then has to be accessible to the barcoding application and the machine that it's installed on, right? So that's where doing it across like a centralized labeling or printing hub would make sense for the larger corporations who need to reach out further. But there is some setup to that. So we'll dive into the actual application here, right? So we'll present a demo and I'll kind of talk through it. And let's see. Okay, so here's a little demonstration of the actual EAM barcoding application. And in here, I'm under the server settings and I'm actually creating the configuration connection between this application and my EAM environment, right? So that's done by my user ID and password, my org, the tenant, which is connection ID, and then my EWS connector server address. So I can then perform the test to make sure that everything's connected and it looks good. And in order to print, we have to have templates, right? So templates are created, you name the template, whatever you want, and you associate it to the data source. And then in your page layout, you can pick the type or size of label that you're going to be using. So this is just a custom label that's 3 inches by 4 inches, for example. And you can see there's a list of pre-existing sizes if you have one already. And then once you have the label size and everything configured, then you can move over to the designer where you can input fields and then fill out the field properties for the items that you're trying to fill out on your label, right? So for our part field, we have it connected to the part data, description, store, manufacturer, so on and so on. Okay. So with that template, parts receipt, looking at pure receipts, right? I'm going to pull in the data. This is connected to EAM, right? So this is pulling direct information. And on my PO receipt 10,000, you can see that I have the labels pulling back for the 3 parts associated to the receipt. Now that we've kind of talked about the configuration, how that kind of goes together, let's talk about how we can utilize it, right? So some scan-based workflows as examples for receiving parts in the inventory, right? You can scan incoming part barcodes upon arrival, then instantly receive them in the EAM, cuts down on paperwork, speeds away put away time, especially for those larger deliveries, right? Now, issuing your parts to your work orders. Technicians can scan parts, they can scan the work order, and it's issued, done, right? So the ensures the parts are accurately tracked against the work orders in real time, so there's no room for mistakes, no need to remember part numbers. Scanning just simply makes it faster and more accurate. Your cycle counts, your physical inventories. So you can do the barcode-based cycle counting if your parts in your bins have the labels, right? And you can utilize that to speed up the actual inputs and counts into the physical inventories so that you can do faster and essentially real-time reconciliation. They also act as scan to search or your barcode lookup. You can scan these items and utilize them in your data spies to return data. So it's a great way to scan directly against an item or a piece of equipment and then have that information be returned to you instantly, right? And then of course, asset tagging. So you can create your labels for equipment and you can physically attach them to equipment, and that makes finding that piece of equipment for your work orders much easier, right? So we all know how it can be a challenge sometimes to find pieces of equipment. So what devices can we use here? Essentially, I don't really know of any that don't work, but EAM utilizes wedge scanners. So wedge scanners are like keyboards, right? So whatever it scans, it reads, and then it immediately types that into an associated field. And it does support Bluetooth, USB scanning, of course, for your static workstations, and then rugged scanners as well for the rougher or field-related environments, right? Basically, if the scanner will scan data into a notepad, it will work into EAM. That's a way to look at it. The phone and tablet use, EAM mobile app, it does utilize the camera on the device to scan barcodes as well. So that's perfect for like a bring your own device type scenario, which gives you a little bit more flexibility as long as your devices have a camera and have the ability to access the mobile applications, right? For printer scanner pairing tips, the most commonly used be your Zebras, your Dymos, Brothers. They integrate pretty easily. As far as pairing goes, as long as they're on the network, you're pretty good there. And if you have the option to adjust your print quality, definitely recommend keeping it a little higher, right? Smudgy or blurry labels sometimes don't scan, and that can cause frustration. And then the mobile offline, right? So if you're offline, you should have the ability to scan those barcodes. The wedge scanner capabilities still work even in offline, and it should fill out the data. And then of course, once you resync or reconnect and then resync, that data is pushed, right? And some best practices. So best practices for label placement. Consistency is king. Place labels where they are easy to see. For bins, eye level, front facing, like the example photo that we have on the slide there. Parts and equipment, it starts to get a little bit more complex. For parts, flat, clean surfaces that are visible so that you can easily scan them. Assets or equipment, you're definitely going to want to aim for avoiding areas prone to dirt or damage, avoid hidden spots or places that are removed or inaccessible during maintenance, right? So that they're easily scannable. You should consider prefixes if you're not doing that already, but any type of nomenclature is good as long as it makes sense within your environment here. The main goal is to prevent duplication. For your formats, try to keep them large and bold, easily readable, especially the actual label, right? And if you can, if it makes sense, use some form of durable, waterproof, or oil resistant type label. You can also cover them. If you want to really plan for longevity, like doing a lamination or even a metal tag on your equipment, as long as it's scannable, right? And some creative use cases. We've seen some. You scan employee badges for time capture, which is pretty interesting. So you can use the barcodes to create the labels that represent your employees, and it can allow for simpler labor tracking along with time card error cut downs and retroactive data entry. Tools and parts check-ins, checkouts, that was pretty interesting. Other things you could see this used for would be like keys, for example. So you can tag tools, parts, keys with your labels and assign them to employees via scanning so that you can cut down on errors of those items being issued out to personnel and then being returned, right? Also activating warranties through serialized asset scanning. So if you can scan a serialized asset during install, and then you can trigger a warranty activation as long as warranty is configured, right? And then the last piece for barcodes as printable form job packets used to scan steps as they return items for work orders. That one's pretty interesting. But it creates a great structure for inspection sign-offs and checklist tracking and whatnot. And questions?
Hey, Tyler, there's one question here. How does tools check-in, check-out process, how does that process work with barcoding?
With tools check-in and check-out, it would operate in the same way that you would currently do that, right? Except instead of having to either type, search, or filter for specific tools that the employee is looking for, you can just simply scan the tool and it will pull it up, and then you can perform that issuance.
Yeah, a couple more questions. So Dora's asking why the word barcoding when it could be a QR code now in the native app, or no skinnable code, rather just a tag with words.
I should have bet on that question. That I knew you were going to ask that, Dora. Yeah, so the barcoding application does not come with the QR font out of the box yet. So as of right now, it is labels through barcoding, right? And then, oh, it does come with QR code label now, the symbology. Generally, when someone asks me, I do always like to look up the label printer, right? But like I said, if you can scan a value of a label from that into a notepad, then it will work with barcoding application, because that's just confirmation that it's a wedge printer or a wedge scanner.
Yeah, there's a question from Katie Lou as well. So has any thought been given to incorporating RFID reading capabilities for RFID labels within EAM in the future?
I have heard that. I need to confirm it though. There's documentation on RFID aspects coming.
And then there's a question, can you print tags from EAM mobile apps directly?
Can you print tags from EAM mobile, like digital work and offline directly? That, I believe so. Good question, Dora. Also an enhancement request you put in?
Yeah, here's a good question too. All good questions, but what are the benefits to using the barcoding app versus using Cognos reports with barcodes?
Ooh, Well, the barcoding application, for one, is going to be a lot cheaper overall to utilize than would be, say, Cognos with an author seat. Also, it depends on how you're utilizing Cognos to generate those barcodes. Obviously, through creating a report that utilizes the symbology, right? But the barcoding application is simply just a quicker way to get around to doing those barcodes.
There's another question here. I know we talked about like using scanning for employee, but the question is, can scanning the barcode serve as the date time book labor of the technician?
Ooh, okay, hold on. Let me go back and look through that one effectively. Equipment label in bulk. Oh yeah, for sure. So through the application, especially for equipment, you can, so through your batch printing, depending on how you filter your data source, will determine what's going to come back, right? So if you create your label template for the equipment and then just run that as a batch, it's going to generate a label for all your equipment. So that might be a lot at once. So I would recommend maybe doing it in categorized or class chunks, but you can do that and then essentially mass print those out.
Okay, can these be printed to a durable tag that can be used for parts and or equipment in the field?
Yeah, you're talking like metal tags and stuff, metal or engraved tags for the field. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I'd have to see well, I'm trying to brainstorm exactly how that would work in my head. So as long as the printer, it depends on the process of making those engraved labels, right? But as long as the printer can do that and it's associated to the application and the printer is accessible, then you should be able to print to it. Yeah, exactly. Dora is correct. But it depends on, I guess, the process of how those engraved tags are made, depending on how you want to do that. But yes.
Here's one that was just submitted, Tyler. Is there any tracker wherein you can use as a reference to prevent duplicate printing?
Built in by default? Don't believe so. Oh, hey, Alex.
I unmuted myself. Fantastic. That's awesome. I figured I'd just do that since I do have maybe master controls. But so this may seem like an elementary question, but it is something I guess I do need to know. So first question, digital work, right, is capable of scanning any code, QR or barcode through the camera of whatever device you're using, correct? Okay, I thought so.
Yep.
So it would make logical sense that there's really not a need to invest in scanning equipment with what EAM can do, especially from the mobile device component. In other words, like, I know we need a printer. I'm not worried about that component, but we really don't need a physical like barcode scanner, right?
Technically, yeah, that's correct. You can use mobile.
Okay. Yeah, we can just use mobile. Okay, that's what I thought. Sorry, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Katie, I'd almost encourage you to expand upon that, right? Like,
yeah, I'm a little curious.
It might make sense to unmute her real quick. That way she doesn't have to type a novel, if she's okay with that.
Yeah, Amanda, I'm not 100% sure what those are. Let me check real quick. Yeah, okay, so those are cool. But yep, as long as they have the wedge capability, then the Pro Gloves would also work. Definitely worth the test. I saw a question come in.
Yeah, Tyler, so the question is, what is the benefit of an actual scanner device? Like Alex was asking about, we basically run reports currently to do an inventory cycle count. So what benefits would a hardware scanner be to that process?
you run reports currently to do an inventory cycle. So you're running a report to give you the current count, and then you go out and manipulate that. With that being the case, this would be a replacement in the process for the manual aspect to list the locations and then count each location. Yeah, so you would utilize this in hand with the counts, right? And then that allows you to scan and ensure that you are updating the correct part that reduces the inaccuracy of typing, things like that. So it's more of like a tool to assist you with your current flow for those physical inventory or cycle counts.
Just to expand upon that, right? Just from what Jeremy's asking, the only other times I could see a like hardware scanner being of any value is, if your organization doesn't have any mobile licenses, or you're just early on getting it configured and you're having a hard time getting there, or we see some organizations too, right, where the approved device list doesn't include like an iPad or an iPhone or a tablet with a camera feature. That kind of defeats the purpose of being able to use digital work to do the cool stuff it can do. So like,
Yep.
if you're unable to get that device, or if you're on a budget constraint as well, right? Like hard scanner devices, like just quite literally the physical, barcode gun that you can get, like they're on Amazon for like $20, right? Like they're super cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're corded. It's got to be attached to a computer. Like there's some nuances to it, but if you still need some form of a way to scan the barcode to eliminate a manual process and you can't utilize digital work, I think using a scanning device like that does have its benefit. It's just a matter of, are you able to make some changes internally necessary to utilize digital work to its full capacity? And if you've got those barriers and there's hindrances, right, like there's ways you can probably make the needle change quickly by spending $20 on a barcode scanner just to get the job done today while you get through the process of everything, right?
Yep, I believe we have a wireless Bluetooth one that we got off Amazon for $25, and it's perfect.
Yeah, there you go, right? Perfect.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think to that, right, like I just understand sometimes practical applications like that can wane away from us when we're trying really hard to get the maximum effect out of the investment, not only in between EAM, but digital work and the effective change behind it. But at the end of the day, you folks have a job that still has to get done. Like your cycle counts don't wait for digital work to become enabled, right? Like you still got to get it done. So I encourage to ask questions not only to us, but to kind of challenge you guys internally as well, right? Like there's ways that we can still get the job done effectively that can be a minimal investment while we get the muscle and repetition built up for what the end desired goal of using EAM or your mobile application can be. Sorry for hijacking your Q&A, Tyler.
All good, man. All good. So with that being said, slide over to our ending slide. I know we got a couple of follow-ups here, but just want to say appreciate you guys stopping in, listening to me rant about barcoding, and fantastic questions, by the way.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate you walking through and sharing your knowledge of barcoding. For everyone that's on the call, this session has been recorded and we will be making it available on our YouTube channel, so you can follow the link tree that I added to the meeting chat and connect with us on LinkedIn, YouTube, so forth. Check out our upcoming events, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Have a great day.
That's right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.